Greetings everyone, let's look at Livy's moving and powerful story of the drunken players. Here's the passage, pause it, let's go through it together. Tibikines, quia prohibiti erant in aide Jovis vesci, aegre passi, tibur uno agmene abierunt, adeo ut nemo in urbe essit qui sacrificis praecinere. Find our subject first. The pipe players, passi, suffering aegre, literally suffering sickly, but I've said suffering terribly, quia, because they prohibiti erant, pluperfect passive there, because they had been forbidden to eat, to dine in the temple Jovis of Jupiter. Abierunt, went away to Tibur in uno agmene, in one group. Adeo, to such an extent, ut, that there was esset, to such an extent, as soon as you see that word adeo, look for a subjunctive. To such an extent that there was no one in the city who could play the pipes, who could play in the sacrifices. So the esset here is in the subjunctive because it is linked to the adeo, and it is going to be a result clause. Adeo, to such an extent that there was no one there who would play. Now the qui, we've got here a subordinate clause within indirect speech, therefore we are dealing with the oratio obliqua, and that is why praecineret is in the subjunctive. So there's no one who could play at the sacrifices. Eos rei religio tenuit senatum, legatosque tibur miserunt ut darent operam ut I homines Romanis restituerentur. The religio, the religious aspect, literally the religiosity of that affair, the religious aspect of that affair gripped the Senate, I've said, and they miserunt legatos, and they sent envoys to Tibur, ut, in order to make an effort, literally to give their work. So they sent them in order, purpose clause, in order that they might make an effort, purpose clause, therefore in the subjunctive, therefore darent, in order to make an effort, ut, that I homines, that those men, in order that those men, so it's actually a second purpose clause really here, isn't it? In order that those men should be brought back to Rome. So you've got there a passive subjunctive in the purpose clause. So they sent ambassadors to Tibur in order that they should make an effort, purpose clause, that those men, I'm almost wondering whether or not that could be an indirect command. Either way, it's in the subjunctive, that those men should be brought back to Rome. Next part. Tiburtini benigne policiti, I'm thinking that probably is, primum accitos eos in curiam hortati sunt, uti reverterentur Romam. The people of Tibur, having politely agreed, policiti, yeah, having politely agreed, primum, literally, they encouraged them having been first summoned into the Senate house. Now we don't want to say that. So akitos here is a perfect passive participle, but we are not going to do it as a having been something. So we're going to say, having first summoned them into the Senate house, they hortati sunt, they encouraged them, to urge them to head back to Rome. So as soon as I see an encouraging or an urging, it's the same as an ordering, isn't it? So it's probably going to be followed by a subjunctive, which it is, and therefore we have an indirect command. Indirect command following on from that deponent verb, hortati sunt, looks passive but is active. So the people of Tibur, having politely agreed, summoned them to the Senate house and encouraged them to, or having first summoned them to the Senate house, encouraged them to return to Rome. Next part. Postquam perpelli nequibant, consilio haud apponente ab ingenis hominum eos aggrediuntur. After they nequibant, after literally they were refusing perpelli, you've got there a passive infinitive. After they were refusing to be convinced, to be prevailed upon, they aggrediuntur, there must be a better word here than attacked, but I've obviously not found it when I did this a couple of days ago. So they endeavoured with, what would it be? They confronted them, maybe, with that's better. They confronted them with a plan, abhorrente, not inappropriate, to the ab ingenis, to the characters of the men. Obviously, it's making a comment, I suppose, about the rock and roll nature of pipe players. So after they refused to be prevailed upon, they, whatever I said, they confronted them with a plan not inappropriate to the characters of those. Die festo ali alios per speciem celebrandarum canto epularum invitant. On a festival day, die festo, time when ablative, the O ending of the festo and the E of the die. So, on a festival day, ali, some invited others, invitant alios, ali alios invitant, some invited others, per speciem, on the pretext of an epularum. And look at this, is it a gerund or a gerundive, I hear Lauren asking. Well, it is epularum and it's celebrandarum, so if it's agreeing with something, that means it's going to be a gerundive. Some invited others on the pretext of feasts being celebrated with music, with song. So the celebrandarum is passive, therefore it is a gerundive. So some invited others on the pretext of celebrating the feast. I'm making it active, on the pretext of celebrating the feast with music, as I rub out the little red bits. Next part. Et vino, quios avidum ferme genus est, honeratos sopiunt, atque ita in plaustra somno vinctos coniciunt ac Romam deportunt. Next part. And they sopiunt, and they made them drunk with wine. Quios, of which genus est, that type, is ferme avidum, of which that type of person is always greedy. It's very rude about pipe players, this passage. And in this way, atque ita, and in this way, they deportant, they coniciunt, they threw them into a wagon, vinctos, having been overpowered with, with sleep actually, I think, rather than with drink that I've said, with sleep, with drunkenness maybe you could say. They, in this way, they threw them in the wagon and they carried them off to Rome. Nec prius sensere quam plaustris in foro relictis plenos crapulae eos lux opres. And they didn't realize anything. Nec prius sensere. Sensere there, historic infinitive. They didn't realize anything until, with the wagons, with the plaustris, with the wagons left, we've got here those is endings telling me that we're dealing with an ablative absolute of the perfect passive participle form here, and with the wagons left in the forum, they didn't realize anything, I'm sorry, until when the wagons had been left in the forum, the light, or pressit, bothered them, sick, it literally means filled with a hangover, sick with a hangover, filled with a hangover. Tunc concursus populi factus impetratoque ut maderent, restitutum in aede vescendi jus is sacris praecinerent. Then a crowd of people gathered around them, and with it impetrato, and with it agreed that they should stay. I suppose that's going to be it's certainly another subjunctive, and I suppose that's another form of the indirect command, isn't it? With it having been agreed, it would be the same as it having been ordered that they should stay. Yeah, and with it having been agreed that they would stay, so the subjunctive for manerent, imperfect subjunctive, with it agreed that they would stay, the law, jus, making it the subject, the law of eating. Now here, Lauren and anyone else listening, we have a gerund. The law of eating in the Ida, in the temple, was restitutum, was restored, is, for those, dative, the pronoun, for those, qui, who, praecinerent, were performing in the sacrifices. That's the end of that, and speaking of food, it is time for me to have my roast lamb that I can smell in the oven. Have a lovely evening, everyone, and good luck with your unseens.